And we are live. Good evening, Brandon.
Good evening, Mimi.
It's great to see you and great to have you here.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so delighted you could take some time out of your busy schedule. And I understand you and Imani Winds have been really on the road a lot, but now you're home in New York.
Yes, I'm home in New York. We've been traveling a lot since mid-January, just kind of nonstop. Few days at home, mostly gone, but it's nice. We really like each other, so we enjoy the concerts that we play. So there's also a lot of fun.
That's what it's all about. I totally get that. That's great. I mean, we have some really amazing performances of yours and with Imani Wins to share this evening. I just want to welcome everybody to Tea with Mimi. This is episode number 41. And I'm thrilled to have my wonderful colleague, Brandon Patrick George, flutist, on with me this evening. And for those of you who are flutists, please, it's a comment or ask questions. It's a great opportunity to chat with Brandon. We're going to definitely be doing, I think, some shop talk tonight. But whatever you play, or if you're just a music lover, we love to hear from you. Please say hi. Please tell us where you're listening from and also what you're drinking this evening. So getting down to what's super important, Brandon, what beverage do you have with you tonight?
I have ginger tea and one of my favorite mugs from Cafe Grumpy with this very grumpy face on it.
That is really cute. I thought it was a grumpy pumpkin, but it might just be not a pumpkin.
It's just a grumpy individual.
Well, ginger is so good and so anti-inflammatory, and I
How
have
about you?
yeah, this is my favorite. One of my favorite teas. It's actually berry tea by Twinings.
Oh, nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
It's not a commercial for Twinings, but really like my students, because I drink this pretty much all the time when I'm teaching, they kind of, I think, associate this scent with lessons.
Oh, that's kind of nice, no?
I think it's pretty nice, yeah. But anyway, but I'm going to officially introduce you. As I mentioned, I'm just very delighted that Brandon Patrick George is here for Tea with Mimi. He is a Grammy-winning flutist and member of Imani Winds. He has performed as soloist with the Atlanta and Baltimore Symphonies, American Composers Orchestra, among others. He's been called elegant by the New York Times and a virtuoso by the Washington Post, among many other accolades. And as a soloist, has performed at Lincoln Center, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Tippett Rise, and WQXR Artist Propulsion Lab. He's also orchestrally performed as guest principal with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and other orchestras, and has many albums and collaborations with great artists, and is also a speaker and panelist on diversity in classical music. He serves on the faculty of the Curtis Institute of Music and the Banff Center. And Brandon, where were you just appointed?
To the Mannes School of Music here in New York City.
That is fantastic. Congratulations
Thank
and
you.
welcome back. And actually, it's been fun because we taught together at Curtis during the COVID pandemic, but
Yes.
virtually. And so we've been on this type of virtual meeting. And I think we've been talking about having a coffee or tea in person in some city for a while. And then I thought, let's just do another virtual one and share it with everybody until we get to actually meet.
No, it's so funny. Yo, I remember that meeting during 2020 when all those students we gathered online and they were all over the world actually, and we all took turns working with them. And I think the year before that, Imani had done the Young Artist Program at Curtis, but in the in person.
Right.
And then in 2021, we started with the wind chamber music. So yeah.
Yes, it was really fun to do that, and great that you and the quintet are at Curtis, which has such a great tradition of wind quintet playing. You've probably encountered because it as being such a small school. When I was at Curtis, we just had 4 of every woodwind. So your cohort, your first year quintet, you were pretty much with those people throughout. Are you finding that?
Yeah, that I think that is such a special thing about Curtis is that you come in and you're paired with a group right away, and it's really nice. I think this is now my fourth school year. So at this point, I've seen people who entered and how they sounded and when they first began, and now they're getting ready to graduate, and just seeing how they grow individually, but how they grow together is really extraordinary. Just to like get to know someone on that level, and I think that's a really special thing about Curtis, because I don't think a lot of schools allow people to sort of stay in those configurations for the entire duration of their studies.
Yes, it's really lovely that you've been enjoying that dynamic. It is very intimate there, and so I'm glad that's kind of
For
the
sure.
tradition that is persisting. We have some great recordings by you that you're sharing tonight, so I would love to dive right in
All
to
right.
some of your Bach partita, and I think I'm going to put the corrente movement on
Okay.
first, and then
Sure.
maybe we can talk about the approach to Bach after,
Okay. Sure.
and whatever else you want to share. Anything you want to share about it before I put it on?
No, I guess we'll talk all the details, I guess, after we have a listen.
That sounds great. Okay, here we go. I'm switching our audio setting right now. Bravo, that's gorgeous.
Oh, Mimi, thanks so much. It's always so weird hearing yourself play. It's like when you listen back to your voice, it's like, do I really speak like that? Oh,
No, I just love the evenness of sound that you did and the rubatos that felt really natural and just kind of organic.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That approach, but I know like Bach is a kind of a specialty of yours, it seems, in your career. And I'm just so curious how you approach this great solo partita, the only unaccompanied flute work that Bach wrote. We have the seven sonatas, of course, and many other works.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think everyone's journey with sort of discovering any kind of music is very personal, sort of that timeline and the way one comes to develop an approach, sort of a style of playing this music. Um, as an interesting side note, I think people might find it interesting that this was the third time I had recorded it. I was very unhappy with the first two times I recorded it. And this was the third recording. And I don't know if I have those files somewhere, but I always thought it would be interesting to share with people what it sounded like because it was over the course of a year.
Mhm.
I was recording this album in 2017 in the spring, and I recorded the Bach then, and I just listened back and I just said, that's not working. For some reason, that's just not it. And then I tried again in the fall of 2017. And that's like, that's closer, but that's still not it. And so I went back in 2018. And in the span of that time, I did something that was probably what I should have done when I was a student. And rather than thinking about this from a flute player's perspective, I thought I would go listen to recordings and approach players who I thought spent more time with this music. And those musicians have to be string players, particularly violin players, who have the partitas and sonatas and who I think just live in that world a little bit more than we flute players do, just because of the amount of music that they have.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of in that over the course of the year that I was listening to all of these string players and their approach to articulation and to phrasing and to things like that. And that's when I decided I had this aha moment and I went back to my score and I just started writing in all of these different things and discovering all of these different patterns and sort of trying to figure out ways that I could bring out this harmonic structure
Mhm.
while also trying to do all of the flute things like the evenness and sound and all of those hard things that we know are so difficult about Bach. But yeah, I think it was really when I started listening more to string players and trying to figure out how I could replicate some of that, and that meant that I had to use more articulations that just are not printed. Just
Yeah.
and when you listen to string players and you compare the manuscripts and things like that, there are things that they take exactly from the manuscript, and there's a lot that they put in just because they're aware of these different rules of the time that you could use certain articulations and things like that. And so that was really eye-opening for me, just to really dive into string players. And then I went back a third time, and I said, okay, I think that's it. So
I love that you told about the two other takes because I think just for me as well, I mean, it's a lifetime joy to play this great music, but I think just because of the sheer reverence that I feel, something like choosing tempos,
yes,
choosing ornaments or articulations, as you mentioned, it's really hard to do. And but I'm kind of with you on that. Like I learned so much from how string players do it and keyboard players, especially
yes,
unaccompanied works. And then another thing that I think I love to do is play the Bach sacred music and cantatas and solos with singers, because I think as a flutist, that's kind of where he gives us a little bit more of a clue
yes,
sometimes about the emotion behind it. Because if you're playing Aus Liebe from the Matthew Passion, it's like a very clear key to the soul of the flute for Bach, literally about the soul, or
yeah.
Seele deine Spitzereien from Easter Oratorio. So, I mean, I think it's a fantastic approach that you went into.
Yeah,
Non-
and I think for sort of approaching what we would call this secular music, if you will, I thought more about string players, of course, but I really, but I when I was at at Oberlin, I took traverso lessons as a secondary instrument, and I have one. And I would not call I'm no expert by any means. Like I said, it was a secondary instrument that I picked up, but it was very fascinating for me to be able to learn that. And then for a number of years, I freelanced in New York, playing period in period orchestras. And so I did actually one of the last things, sort of freelance orchestral things I did before I joined Imani, is that I did play the St. Matthew Passion over Easter weekend, I think in 2017. So I actually think that's actually interesting that you bring up the vocal music and the oratorios, because it was literally at the same time around that I was recording this that I was actually in an orchestra playing, the Baroque flute for St. Matthew Passion. Yeah.
Wow, and the pitch is so different on those traversos.
Wild. It's absolutely wild.
It's humbling. Yeah. But that's so great. And actually my graduate master's student, who's a wonderful flutist, Anabel Torres, is listening and just says hello. And we also have some greetings from Adrian Lemon in Albuquerque, drinking sparkling water, very refreshing. And terrific choral conductor is here, Rick Rosen. He comes on with his choral group named Cordus Mundi. Really enjoying, he loves your tone, such a marvelous tone, and some other really nice comments from him. Edmundo Gomez Muro, shalom a usted también. Gracias por su comentario. Saludos. All right, and Victor Coco is here. Thanks for your greetings. Everyone who has questions for Brandon, please put them in the chat. We'll be delighted to chat with you. I think I want to stay with a little bit more partita. You shared a video of the Sarabanda.
Oh, sure.
I was about to say, I love this move. I love all four movements. So maybe we'll have some Sarabanda now. And then,
sure, absolutely.
Great. so beautiful, Brandon.
Thanks, Amy. Good memories of, well, I don't know if I have great memories of that. It was recorded, I think 2020 or 2021. So it
Mhm.
was one of those things where music festivals were recording films instead of in-person concerts.
Right.
So that was I did a film. I filmed a recital here in New York, and it was fully unaccompanied. It's about a 30-minute long recital,
Mhm.
and that was one of the pieces. And of course, as many flutists, I'm sure, got very familiar with their solo music during COVID.
Absolutely, and that kind of in between feeling, right, of filming, so performing, but not having an audience, so not having that energy that we're so used to. It was tough and kind of different, right,
For
during that
sure.
time, but it's yeah, but we have some really, kind of inspiring visuals, right? That stark warehouse look or something, and then the saraband, right, of Bach.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they did a really good job of capturing the mood for the piece and for the time for sure that we were living through.
Yeah, well, we have some questions for you. I was just going to say something about ornamentation, but actually, Annabelle Torres asks, "Well, hello from SoCal. What a captivating sound! How do you personally approach adding ornamentation? How much is too much? Not enough?" That is the question. So let me ask ask you, Brennan, what your approach is.
Oh my gosh, that's a really, really tough question. I think for me, I think about take a movement like this, both sections repeat. I like to take the approach that you don't play the same thing twice the same way. Like I think that it should be different.
Mhm.
I tell students that I'm not very strict in that I'm trying to tell them exactly what to do. A lot of times I say, I don't really care what you do, but please don't do the same thing twice. Please do something different. Um, and I think for me, it was a fine line of trying. It's always a fine line of trying to honor the structure and the line that has already been created by the composer. But then I think for me, the freedom often can be when one decides to fill in the blanks whenever possible. I think that can be an interesting way to look at it. And I think sometimes there aren't a lot of places to fill in the blanks because the composer has given you so much information. And I think in that case, you might realize if you try to put too many in, it might simply be too much. But I think when you can take time to find different places to bring out the harmonic structure, and to bring out certain different aspects of the phrasing or the line, that can be nice. But I think that it should never be distracting, but I think it should always be surprising. I think that's one way I think about it. Always surprising, but never distracting. Um, and so I think the combination of using one's instinct, natural intuition, and then sort of, I don't know if you receive feedback from a teacher or a mentor or a colleague or a friend. I play things for friends and colleagues all the time. It's always nice to have their feedback, because it's nice to hear for them because they're on the other side, right? So if something's too much, maybe they'll tell me. But I think that's a good way to kind of think about it.
Yeah, those are phenomenal tips. And actually, one thing that I love about what you said is just that it should, in some ways, be different every time. If we're following that spirit of what we understand of the Baroque period, that there was this improvisatory feeling about ornaments, and
Yeah.
that even different famous flutists at the time had signature types of ornaments and techniques that they were particularly good at.
Yep.
It comes up a little bit in our study of Blavet, right? The 18th century flutist who refused to leave Paris to go to Potsdam and the court of Frederick the Great. So France was just there. But I'm sure he's not the only person who would refuse to leave Paris. But
Right. Right. For sure. Like I can't say I blame them, but
I know. But no, so I think I like that approach, right? Of embracing it, because I think um performing Bach is really different from recording it, and
for
maybe
sure.
that's kind of with anything, right? We have that pressure to, this is going to be definitive, this represents my views, but part of our views are trying to be spontaneous each time, so that's creates a
Right, and I think a lot of that, even when I think about recording, like, that was me sort of in my ideas. I don't know how many ever years ago that was now,
Mhm.
Now I have different ideas. I don't, some things I might replicate in a concert, but I think many of those things I might not even do anymore, right? Just because once you finish something, whether it's a concert or recording, you're no longer the same person you were 30 seconds ago, 1 minute ago, or 8 years ago, right? So we're always changing, and it's always good to come up with new ideas and embrace new ideas, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, in the second part of that Sarabanda, you left one sort of cadential moment so bare. And I really perked up because then you took the repeat and put a really interesting semi little Eingong or cadenza like flourish in there before the recap. So, yes, I like that proportion. It was not lost on me what you did there.
Oh,
But but actually, this brings up something. I know we have some flutists listening, so I'll just do one more flute nerd moment. I actually really like taking both repeats in my box solo movements and my CPE box solo movements. Part of it is we just have one solo piece by each guy, so maybe we need to hear it a little longer. But I like how you do that. Did you always do that, or you just kind of, is that a later decision to take both repeats? And just to fill people in, everyone takes the first repeat, but not everyone takes the second repeat when the second part is much longer than the first part, if that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
yeah, that's interesting. I feel like for many years I would take the first repeat. And I think that, and I sometimes wonder, I remember when I was in high school and doing like, you know, all state or whatever auditions and competitions. And it was like, always take the repeat, don't take the second repeat. And it always seemed like it was a matter of timing. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't really like an artistic choice as much as like a practical, we have more people to hear. Please do not take the second repeat.
exactly.
But I think when you think about the balance and the proportions of a piece,
Mhm.
um, I do feel like it's important to take the repeats because even though the material is repeated and you think, well, the composer, I don't know, just didn't want to write something out or whatever. No, it's like it's actually, it gives you a form, and to have an idea come back, to have a cadence repeat, maybe to have it played a little differently. So yeah, I started doing it, and as you know, Mimi, like it's quite tiring, right? This music is very tiring. So to actually take the repeat, I think my flute self wants to say, don't take the repeat. It's so tiring. But my sort of musical intellectual side of me wants to take the repeat, even if it's going to exhaust me, because to give the piece its full structure.
Well, that's very well put. I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking maybe this is what happens if as our stamina grows and our ideas grow. Maybe we could grow into those repeats when we have enough to say
Right.
and yeah.
And I don't think I always had a lot to say. I don't think, and I still don't know how much I have to say, but I still like to take the repeats now. So there we go.
No, it's great. I'm with you on that. Let's let's keep doing them. That's good. And actually, I was going to talk a little bit about your training and flute influences, and we actually have a question just about that from Victor Coco, who asks, "Do you have musical influences from favorite flute artists?"
Oh my gosh, favorite, that's so tough. Actually, someone, I had to answer that question again recently, and I was kind of stumped. I was like, because there's so many. Well, influences. Well, I went to Oberlin and I studied with Michel Debost, and that I think played a really big part in my development for sure. The way he trained his students, and the way he thinks about music and the flute and all of these things. I think that was really an important time in my life. I grew a lot. He was tough, but I think also very caring and very generous, as a teacher, and was a good fit for me. I think I needed that. Um, and so he played a big role in my development. Um, I I of course listened to so many different flutists growing up. I think I loved Peter Lucas Graves' recordings. I think he has a very special sound. I think it's quite identifiable right away, the way he makes the flute sing. And I remember when I was in high school and I was playing the Reinecke concerto and being like discovering recordings and going to CD shops, because that was a thing. Like we, actually go to CD shops. I'm actually dating myself by saying I went to CD shops. But I remember
That.
yeah, but I remember going to a CD shop and discovering his recording of these romantic flute works, and just thinking what an extraordinary sound that he had. Um, I listened. There was a great recording. I don't know if it's online, of your teacher, Mimi, Julius Baker. There was a live recital that he did.
Yeah.
I think it had like Muchinsky and maybe some other things on it, I think. I
Yeah.
remember having that recording when I was in high school too. And I thought, I mean, of course I knew his recordings and the videos from the New York Philharmonic, but I actually think there's something extraordinary about hearing a person play live, to see how they respond to the energy in a concert hall. It's not edited. You don't know what's gonna happen. Of course, his level of playing was so extraordinary, even under like so much pressure in the repertoire that he would choose to play. But I remember that being really important
Mhm.
for me growing up. And of course, Ron Paul, James Galway, I listened to all of those recordings. But I will say, like, Peter Lucas Grass recordings are ones that I've come back to in my adult life and found just as much beauty, if not more, in them now than I did back then. And there's so many other great artists out there for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm so interested to learn that. But it's always really nice when a colleague will bring up a Julius Baker recording, because that was kind of my experience. I had just been playing flute a couple years when my mother brought a recording of Julius Baker, and I was really tiny, but I just heard the sound and identified it with it so much. I said, this is what I want to sound like. And then it was a dream come true to meet him when I was 11, and then to start studying with him, and then going to Curtis to work with him when I was 12. Absolutely, that inspiration of the Baker sound. And then, of course, his student Jeffrey Kane, also part of
Right.
tradition.
But I love that video of you two together playing. It's so special. It really is special. It's really, really something.
Oh, thank
How
you.
fortunate you were to be able to have him as a teacher and a mentor, because he really, I think, left a huge print on not only flute playing here, but also all over the world, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely. No, I feel so lucky to have that. And just all the memories. He was like another grandfather for me. I already had a grandpa, Julie, so we joked that he was my additional grandpa.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. And I think that's always interesting with teachers too. Like I always thought when I was at Oberlin that Michel DeBose kind of felt like a grandfather to me. And I did not know my grandfathers. They passed away before I was born.
I'm sorry.
But so, oh yeah, it was an age thing. Like people had kids, some had early, some had them later. So, but yeah, I remember feeling like there was this sort of toughness where of a father like figure who wants to make sure you're doing your best, but also this caring quality that if you ever were struggling or felt like overwhelmed, that you could still receive the support that you needed to move forward. So I felt really fortunate to have him as a
That
teacher.
is wonderful that you had that mentorship relationship as well. And, I was going to play something for you as a surprise at the end, but this is so apropos to what we're talking about, flutists and styles. I have a live, I think it's live, Georges Barrère recording.
Oh my gosh.
Can we listen to this together? It's Bach, C major, and then maybe talk a little bit about styles.
Oh, sure. Please, let's do it.
Okay, this is going to be really cool. It's going to be crackly. It's a very old recording. Okay.
Can you hear me? Or you made me mute it.
Oh, sorry.
There
There
you
was,
are.
yeah. Okay, I think
Wow.
wow.
Wow. That was a surprise for sure.
I bet, right? And I think it was an actual very old recording of Georges Barrère with harpsichord, which is pretty amazing. I didn't know that particular one existed, but I thought it'd be really interesting to just listen together, knowing that you have blended sort of American and French training. But that said, we kind of I think even all our American teachers have French training in the background because, for example, Julius Baker, my teacher, studied with William Kincaid, who studied with Georges Barrère, who we just heard. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The sound in the first movement, and the way the usage of vibrato and things like that was sort of like a very, um, I like early 20th century, very sort of like French sound. I think lots of I don't want to say like a lot, but it's just like it's very present and very lively. The sound and brilliant. Um, and I thought that the fast movement was quite interesting in that there were no articulations, which is always interesting, and to hear how performances of Bach have evolved over the course of 100 years or so, and the things that we have available to us, the resources that we have available. Like if you think back then, how would you transmit information? So discovering different kinds of recordings and different kinds of books. It was much harder to have access to those things back then. And this is an early recording, so there weren't even really recordings that you could have. So we just live in a time where there's such a wealth of information that can help us. If you want to learn how string players approach Bach, right, all you have to do is get on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, you Google any of your favorite violin players, and boom, you have it right there. It's very interesting to hear. What do you think, Mimi? What is your take on hearing older recordings and things like that?
I know. Well, I mean, I love it too, just as an insight into how different styles were approached. Like Bach, I mean, people play really differently. I guess there was a lot of things were slower, like in the 1950s, that we tend to play faster today.
Right.
But his tempos, even for the first movement, the slow tempos were pretty flowing, and then the prestos were really fast. He was also known as such a virtuoso who toured in the United States, coming from France. But I really resonated with something that you said, because I was thinking about just the sound. There's a really beautiful purity to it,
Sure.
even despite the crackles of the old recording,
Right.
and especially the higher register with that brilliance is something I would characterize as the typical, let's say, classic French sound. But
Yeah, for sure. Clear and
yeah,
brilliant, for sure. Yeah.
maybe the way we associate with Rampal in many ways,
For
much
sure. Yeah, I mean, he had a very brilliant sound, you know.
but interesting, like Barrère's middle to low register, it definitely has like some power and punch and darkness. So it kind of blends lightness and darkness, which I think is great for flute. It's kind of an
I
ideal.
always find this interesting too. People saying, and this is true, orchestras have gotten louder, concert halls have gotten bigger. And so maybe there is this sort of idea that flute players just naturally do have to play louder in order to even be heard. But I don't think that that's a new phenomenon. You can listen to like these older recordings and you can hear that even back then, these players had quite a lot of power. And something else I find very interesting, I played a Louis Locke flute a couple years, probably about 5 years ago for a recital. I was playing Debussy at the Met Museum for an exhibition, and the flute was actually from sort of when Debussy would have been, writing, et cetera, et cetera.
That's awesome.
And I think people have this sort of concept of sound and that how much has changed, or that maybe the sound was lighter back then.
Mhm.
But I got a lot of sound out of that old Louis Locke flute. It was very loud and kind of brilliant. And I was like, it kind of went against what I had heard about, how those instruments worked or maybe how people played them. And so I think when we hear recordings like this, it's proof that they did get quite a bit of sound and they did play quite brilliantly. And it's kind of cool.
That is really great. What a nice experience with the Louis Lot. Because yeah, I think our stereotype of what those instruments must have been like is exactly what you're saying. So Yeah,
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
interesting. M, I think, is a flutist who's commenting on she really enjoyed hearing that and loves the full long phrasing lines. Thanks. Yeah, keep your comments and questions coming, everybody. And before maybe you can introduce the Imani Winds performance, I wanted to ask you what flute you play.
Oh, that's a great question. When is this this recording is probably from 2 years ago now, I'm guessing. So that would be I play a 14 karat Muramatsu.
Okay.
That's my flute. I played a silver one for many years. Actually, I recorded the Bach partita on my silver Muramatsu actually.
Okay.
And I played that flute for about a decade, and just about coming up on 3 years ago now, acquired the 14 karat Muramatsu.
Oh, that's really wonderful to have a new member of the family, right?
Yeah, it's really special. I'm enjoying this instrument, and it's always, as we all know, it takes a while to kind of adjust to an instrument. You're always discovering
Yeah.
new qualities and maybe new possibilities that you might not have had before on your other instrument. That just completely sort of changes your perspective on playing. So I've really been enjoying this new flute for sure.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, let's hear
Moni,
it.
what kind of flute do you play?
Oh, yes, I play Yamaha. So I'm a
Yamaha,
Yamaha
right? Yep.
performing artist and clinician, and I just have loved my Yamaha flutes. I switched over a few years into studying at Curtis.
Hmm.
Having tried Julius Baker and Jeffrey Kainer's, my teacher's flutes, and it
Yep.
definitely needed something different at that time. And it's just been wonderful. I kind of probably my favorite combination for materials is actually a gold head joint and silver body.
That's a great combination for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah, but Yamaha makes great flutes. They make very beautiful instruments for sure. Yeah.
Yes. No, and actually the one I'm playing now is a custom. So it's based on the Julius Baker model, which I think is one of the greatest flutes ever made. But
Mhm.
I asked for a few tweaks on it. And so there are currently 6 of these and they're pretty awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy just trying it for fun. And I think Muramatsu and Yamaha have really good similar scales. Like when I've tried Muramatsu, which is excellent, also it just feels like the intonation is very doable.
Yeah, the scales is quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When coming from Yamaha, yeah. So I would love to play the Afro Blue by Mongo Santa Maria, arranged by Valerie Coleman, the
Yes.
pioneering founder, flutist, composer of Imani Winds.
Yes.
Yeah, anything you want to introduce with that, Brandon, or we could also talk on the other side of the piece.
Um, let's talk on the other side. I can say a lot about it, but I think we should just hear it. Yeah.
That sounds great. Okay, here we go.
That was fun.
That was rollicking and so much fun. And you guys, I love how you memorized it and did the movement and even the singing and snapping. It was great.
Yes, it's a fun one. You know, when I joined, I
Mhm.
think maybe I learned it in my first season, and I remember Monica, our bassoon player, who's a founding member of the group, said, "Okay, so there's this song. It's called Afro Blue. Now Valerie arranged it, but we don't use music. We never use the music." So she said, "What do you want to do? I can send you the music and you can learn it that way, or we can just try to rehearse it and sort of guide you along." And I said in the beginning I wanted the music. I ultimately ended up not really. I looked at it a few times at home in practice to sort of get the form and structure down and sort of like the harmony and stuff. But then I chose to just rehearse it without the music because I thought it would just I just wanted to get comfortable pretty quickly. So so that was really helpful. But that was an interesting thing. She's like, I have the music, but we don't use it. Do you want to see it or do you not want to see it?
Yeah, no, that's great. So does it vary a lot? Is there improvised stuff in there, or is it kind of?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say 90% of what you hear
Mhm.
is really what Valerie put down. So the way the voicings, the harmonies, the things like that. But there is a lot of room for improvisation, particularly in the opening. She sort of gives rough ideas for gestures and things like that. But other than that, it can kind of be open and how long you play it or how long or how short you play the introduction.
Mhm.
Sometimes we play it a bit faster if it's going to be on a long concert, or sometimes if we want it to be longer, we might expand the opening a little bit. And sometimes we don't do the portion with the singing actually for a shorter version. But that what you heard is when we do the full version.
Well, it's really great because it's just such seamless ensemble, which of course you guys are known for.
Thanks, Mimi. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to play with those brilliant musicians, and we have a lot of fun. And they challenge me, we challenge each other, but I think it's a really fantastic group of people, and I feel really honored. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that I'm just so enjoying getting to know your playing and your career is this idea of just being a soloist and chamber musician and teacher and someone who comes up with his own artistic projects. And this is really, what I love doing as a flutist as well. We're both a little bit non-traditional in the sense that I guess the traditional paths would be orchestra or university professorships. And we love our colleagues who do those things,
Oh
but
yeah.
we're not them. So what, did you always know you wanted to do this type of mix?
That's a great question. I have no idea what I thought. I just knew I wanted to play the flute. I don't really know. I didn't really know what that would entail.
Yeah.
I did know I kind of enjoyed orchestra music, orchestral repertoire when I was in youth orchestra in high school and things like that. But when I was in college, I didn't really have a clear idea whether or not I wanted to play in an orchestra. I know that I loved playing alone and I loved chamber music,
Mm.
but it didn't seem like anyone was saying like that was even a possibility. It was like either you were going to play in an orchestra or you were going to teach, right? But I was at Oberlin, where it's a place where people are very creative and think outside of the box.
Mm.
I think about people like Claire Chase, who
Yeah.
graduated some years before I did, but went on to start the International Contemporary Ensemble. Just a real entrepreneur. I think like the world has changed a lot in the past 20 years, and there's so many different possibilities. But I think I felt good at a school where people encouraged me to do different things so I could figure out what I wanted to do and I wasn't being steered. And even though Michelle had this career in the Orchestre de Paris and taught at the Paris Conservatory and then came to
Yeah.
the States to Oberlin, sort of a more traditional, I guess, path, if you will. He didn't really dictate to his students that they should do one thing or another. And I think that was just sort of the nature of being at a school like Oberlin, where we just could explore different possibilities.
Mm.
And before I joined Imani Winds, I was traveling, playing freelancing as an orchestral player,
Right.
like for many years. I'd say almost 8 years. After school, I traveled. I took auditions just like other people. Most went poorly, some went okay. I got a lot of great opportunities to appear with different orchestras, and I still do that from time to time if I can. But yeah, I had no idea that my life would have gone in this direction. But
Yeah.
I feel very, very fortunate. And I look at people like you, Mimi, who like you, this wonderful concert series that you have in Philadelphia, and the work that you do for the audiences there in the Philadelphia community, your recordings, you know, from everything. I think you are a really great example of what is possible for players, and I hope your students realize that, like, you really are not only, you know, giving them something as being a great teacher, but as a role model of like what is really possible. Because I think that sometimes is more important, that a student, if particularly if they're playing at a very high level, right, they have a teacher who's willing to let them identify their strengths and let them go in that direction, no matter what that teacher's background might be, but that they believe in that student, and that they're going to, if they lean into what they love and what they do best, that they'll find their way, they'll find their footing, you know.
Well, thank you so much for what you said, Brandon. Yeah, absolutely. This diversity of what we do is something I hugely admire about your work. But I think probably my teachers, as great orchestral players, primarily Julius Baker and Jeffrey Keener, assumed I'd follow them in that wonderful path. And I love orchestral repertoire. And, you know, it's a little hard as a flute soloist. We don't really have the Brahms, right? Or Dvorak flute concertos and stuff. But I think I always loved solo and chamber so much, and founded an ensemble when I was at Curtis with my friends, David Ludwig and Dan Kellogg, composers.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Jennifer Higdon was actually our faculty advisor too.
Wow.
And we had a lot of fun. We played Curtis music from all time, but it was kind of my first taste of having an ensemble. And it probably was in there for when I did found Dolce Suono Ensemble. So I think that definitely suits me, and I love that. But yeah, absolutely what you're saying, like, definitely want to encourage our students to follow their own path. And I think in a way it has become easier, because in a way the business is tougher, but people are encouraged to be more entrepreneurial and more creative about finding that future.
For sure. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's just been such a joy to chat with you, Brandon, and to hear some of your gorgeous recordings. And we have actually one more question from someone I'd love to ask you. Before we say goodnight, I also wanted to ask if there's anything you want to share or something you're really excited about that's coming up.
Something I want to share that I'm really excited coming up. Yeah. I don't. Stay tuned. I don't know. You can see my website, brandonpatrickgeorge.com, and see where I'm playing. There's always interesting projects. I'm touring with the Escher String Quartet this season. And we have a program that has Hinastera, Amy Beach, Mozart Flute Quartet. And that's really exciting for me, because they're extraordinary musicians, and to play that wonderful repertoire with great string players is a lot of fun. So I'm really excited about that. And we're in DC later in March. We're in DC at the Phillips Collection. So I'm looking forward to being there for sure.
That's a great program. That sounds fantastic. Yeah. So Cordis Mundi or Rick Rosen says, what if you guys were to collaborate on something? That sounds fantastic to me.
I would love that. I would love nothing more. Like, done. Like, Mimi, you tell us what we're doing. Tell me what we're doing. Like, I'm there for it.
Well, same, Brandon. Okay. Well, we'll keep these ideas going. That sounds
for
awesome.
Sure.
Yeah. And then Am just asked, she's curious when you played in the Pittsburgh Symphony, trying to figure out that she might have seen you when she lived there.
That 2015, I want to say. I was 2015. Yeah. Yeah, and have I been back to Pittsburgh since? I've played concerts in Pittsburgh with Imani Wins for Chamber Music Pittsburgh. And we had a 2-year residency with Chamber Music Pittsburgh a few years ago. So I was there quite a bit. But yeah, I love Pittsburgh. Great town. Good food.
Absolutely. My duo pianist is from there. Charlie, who you might have met. I'm not sure if you've met Charlie.
I don't think I've met him, but I know all of your beautiful recordings together. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, great.
Absolutely. Well, Brandon, thank you for sharing your artistry and your ideas. And it's been just such a pleasure hearing you and hearing from you tonight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mimi. This was fun. I got to enjoy my ginger tea and have great conversation with you. And one of my favorite flute players. This is incredible. Thank you.
Same for me. Thank you. And yeah, and I want to thank everyone for coming. By the way, this stays up as a video. So if you joined late or missed it or want to send this to friends, please do that. And oh gosh, Brandon, do you have a time for one more question? My student Annie Reiser is here.
Sure.
She's super talented from Boyer College of Music and Dance at Temple University. Oh, this is such an important question. I bet everyone wants to know this. Is there any advice you wish you had received as an undergraduate student?
Advice that I wish I had received as an undergraduate student. Oh gosh. I think, okay, yes, I will say this. I think practicing is really, really important. I think working hard is really important. That's great. If you love what you do, you're going to do the work. I will say this, spend a lot of time listening. Go to concerts. Go to concerts. You're in Philadelphia. Go hear the Philadelphia Orchestra. Go hear your teacher's great series. Go to Philadelphia Charity Society and hear all of the great artists who come through Philadelphia. I think that that can play almost just as much of an important role in one's development as the lessons and the practicing, because going to concerts opens your mind up to different possibilities and helps you cultivate your own ideas. And I think I was encouraged as a student to go to concerts, but I think sometimes I was like, oh, I just got to practice. I need to go practice. Like, I don't want to go today. Like, I want to go practice. And I think there's always going to be more that you can practice. There's always going to be more work to do. But when you have an opportunity to go to a great concert or to learn from a great artist, do it, because that will change your life. And yeah, I just think I try to tell students, practice and work hard, but please spend time listening and go hear live music. Go hear live music. It is not the same thing as recordings.
Absolutely. Listen to these words of wisdom, Annie and everybody, but thanks for sharing that. That is super important, Brendan. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And once again, merci beaucoup. I wish you bonne nuit. I think it was a few years ago that you mentioned that you were using my parents' French book.
That's right. I was going to mention that. Yes. That's such an interesting thing. Yeah. So I did my study abroad in Paris in 2007.
Wow.
We didn't talk about that. Went to Paris. I was Paris Conservatory, Sophie Cherrier, like worked with her. I was there for a semester. Fantastic. I had taken French in college and in high school, but I needed a certain amount of French in order to be able to go abroad for study abroad. That was about 2 to 3 years of college level. Did it. But then forgot about it for many, many years, over a decade. I decided I wanted to start studying again. And my husband got me the book that your parents like brilliantly put together. Like, it's amazing. And for a review book. And that I had no idea. Amazing.
Well, I think by now there's a new edition we're going to have to send you. So
oh my gosh, there's a new edition.
Not fifth edition, but that was really cool.
That is a new, that's not the one I have. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow. Well, to be continued. I can't wait to talk more with you. I feel like there's just so much in common that I would love to continue our conversation. But thank you again so much for sharing with everybody tonight.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Mimi. Appreciate it.
Oh, so much fun. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
I'm just ending the stream. Is that okay? Oh, do you want to?